Hey everybody, today we are going to go over some of the things that we learned at Sick Week. We just got back yesterday and I figured I would share with y'all, try to make anybody that's interested in doing a drag and drive, make their life a little bit easier. We learned, well, we should learn. We saw a lot of stuff that people had problems with and that we helped with and loaned out stuff to. And I figured I'd kind of go over some stuff that helped us be rather successful in the plan prior to going to Sick Week. So, if you're not familiar with the car, it's a 93 convertible Mustang. We just won Sick Week's Rowdy Radial class. It was 8th mile heads up, you're on a 235 radial, a little tricky of a tire. I think our average was like a 464, something like that. So, and we ran it through the quarter one day, went 710 at 206, but the tire shook at about 200 mile an hour, so is what it is. Anyway, I want to go over some of the stuff that I did, I had done prior to going to Sick Week that kind of alleviated a lot of our problems. So the first thing is that I noticed, we sat in traffic for a while on some of the drives, and cars get hot. So I made a video on this earlier, but cooling system cannot be too big. There's no such thing as too big in driving these things around. So this combo makes about 3,200 horsepower on full tilt. Driving around though, it's just a regular dump truck motor that you got to keep cool. So I wanted a cooling system that could keep this thing around 170 degrees when it was 90-ish degrees outside. We sat in traffic in Orlando for about an hour, and I think it was 89 degrees out, and the car never got over 165. So the bigger the radiator, the better. This is a dual pass, which means water comes in here, goes all the way across the radiator, then comes back, and then hits the water pump down at the bottom. I used a Davies Craig water pump. It's buried down there, kind of hard to see. And I carried a spare with me. We didn't need it, but the Davies Craig pump is just way down there in the front bumper, way down there. So y'all know what they look like. We also had, and I made a video on these, we put 2017 Chevrolet Silverado brushless cooling fans on the car. They're huge. They're 16-inch. There's two of them. They move a tremendous amount of air. They don't fit in everybody's combo, obviously, because they're huge, but they worked really well. So cooling was number one, right? So that's like the number one thing that we saw, people overheating, having problems. The next thing we saw was some parts failures, and they were dumb parts failures, right? So it was mostly sensors that had failures. I'm not gonna name companies that had, like I'm not in the business of bad-mouthing other companies, but we use either Rife sensors or Holley sensors on everything that we do. They're reliable. They don't fail. I didn't have a single failure. Nobody I knew had a failure. I mean, I'm sure there probably was one or something maybe, but at least it wasn't told to me. So Rife sensors work fantastic. Holley sensors work fantastic. I like the Rife ones. We do some of these blocks. We also have a lot of their new screw-in sensors in the car. Anyway, all of them read the way they're supposed to. Didn't miss a beat, even with over 200 miles an hour, over 1,000 miles, 950 miles, and 90-degree ambient temperature. Never had a problem. All right. So the next thing that I would highly suggest is if you've got any sensors that are oddball to your car, carry spares. So I carried throttle position sensor with me. It's a Ford style throttle position sensor, but and they can be picked up at AutoZone, but they're cheap enough. I might as well just have two of them with me. Carried them, didn't need any, but it's something that I had to deal with another guy who was had a bad throttle position sensor. Crank sensors as well. So it's gonna be kind of hard to see, but down in here, you can see the crank sensor down here. So after that gap was set, I put Loctite on the jam nut way down here. All right, so I put Loctite on the jam nut and then strain relieved the cable so that it didn't matter if it vibrated or anything. It's just, it's not moving, it's not going anywhere. Same thing with the cam sensor, Loctite. I use the orange stuff that you can actually break free. But I also carried spares, didn't need them as well. We had one failure this entire event. And this is not me being boastful, I'm actually rather surprised, right? I planned for the worst, and we got the best result that we could. So the only failure that we had, and it's not really even a failure, it's hard to say that it's a failure, but this spark plug wire right here, if you notice, this one's different, right? So it was rested up against the header. I made multiple spark plug wires before we left, but I bought a set of plug wires from FireCore, and they showed up about a day or two right before we left. I wanted to run them. They're a great spark plug wire, but I knew that it was resting up against the header. I knew it was going to burn up, right? So we made a pass on day 0. We made a pass on day 1. We loaded up, we hit the road, and then we headed 170-ish miles to Bradenton, and stayed at the hotel, got up in the morning, headed off to the racetrack, and I went to go change spark plugs in the morning, and this is what we had. So it just burnt through the boot, but this had a cover on it, right? So the reason that it was so easy for me to tell that there was a problem is when I pulled on the boot, the wire actually pulled out. So this isn't FireCore's fault in any way, shape, or form. This is my fault, because this spark plug wire, if you look at its orientation, it was like this, and it was rested up against that header right here, right? So air gap for heat is your friend, right? So being able to have some type of an air gap from the header to the plug wire is absolutely a necessity. Don't let them lay up against it. If you end up buying 4 different sets of spark plug wires until you find the exact right boot that fits right, that's okay, because it's a heck of a lot easier to figure it out when you're driving around at home than it is when you're 1,000 miles away from home and then you're 400 miles away from your truck and trailer, right? So plan ahead. I would almost tell you to grab a feeler gauge and get at least 125 thousandths gap between anything that can get hot versus anything that shouldn't get hot. So that was our only failure. So some of the other stuff that we saw some injector problems, and a lot of it was from contaminated fuels or lack of maintenance or whatever it may be. So I am a firm believer in using the proper sized injector and maintaining them for the application. We use AFIS injectors. Some other people claim that they've had a problem. I'm just going to say that most of it's because of the way that they're wired or the way that they're controlled. This is a set of AFIS injectors here, and then right next to it is a set of Siemens Deca 220 injectors. So the way this car works is, and then down in here, way down in that hole, kind of hard to see, but down in that hole there's a third set of injectors, and those are 80 pound-per-hour Siemens Deca injectors that we use for pump gas. So the way I tune this thing is, if we're going to drive on the street, we drive on strictly pump gas, completely segregated fuel system with those 80 pound-per-hour injectors. When we race the car, we idle it and we get it to go up on the chip, and I've made videos about this, teaching you all how to do this in Holley EFI, on the 220s, and we transition over to 100% on the 600s from AFIS while it's on the chip. The car goes down the racetrack using just the AFIS injectors. So there's no chance of mixing pump gas and methanol together. People had some problems with contaminated fuel or whatever. That's a good way to torch your stuff. So if you're gonna build a drag and drive car, do 2 completely separate fuel systems. I saw multiple people with there's 3 ball valves under the hood. They gotta remove a whole bunch of crap. All we did was change the tune-up and we were done, right? So if you're gonna build a car, if you're gonna get a car ready for Sick Week or Drag Week or our event in April, Southeast Street Meet, maybe consider doing a dual fuel system. If you've got a car that you drive around on E85 and you race on E85, this doesn't pertain to you. But if you've got multiple fuels in a car, keep them completely separated, way easier. All right, Moving on, again, remember I said heat was a big thing. Every hose, or just about every hose, we use a high temp sleeve over top of. So you don't know how hot this thing gets until you sit in some 90-degree traffic for about an hour. And underneath the hood, it just gets very, very hot. You don't think about it when you get in your new car or your everyday vehicle because it just works. But when you get into your hot rod, you start thinking about it, you start stressing about it. So we didn't have any overheating problems. We didn't have any run hot problems. We didn't have any of that stuff. And I believe it's because we planned ahead. The next thing we saw a bunch of was batteries, right? So batteries charging, keeping it charged, having to run a battery charger on, when they got to the hotel, or they'd have to pull over, fire up their generator, run the battery charger for, a half hour, and then they could drive for about a half hour. We heard a whole bunch of stuff in the hotel parking lots. And a lot of that is because of an improperly sized alternator. So we use a PowerMaster alternator that we had spec'd out by PowerMaster for us. This is a P-Motive 16-volt battery. So the video that I just uploaded, you'll hear the car crank in those videos. It cranks at about 290 to 300 RPM. It's insane how fast this thing cranks, and it's because of that P-Motive battery. This alternator here puts out 140 amp at idle, right? So what we mean by idle is every alternator's got a certain RPM where it actually excites at, okay? Where it's gonna turn on and start putting out amperage. It's gonna start putting out power. So that's based off of the pulley ratio, right? So this pulley here is half the diameter of this pulley here, which means the alternator spins at twice the speed of the engine. So if the engine's running at 1,000 RPM, the alternator's running at 2,000 RPM. If you are interested in going to 16 volt and you want a drag and drive combination, hit us up. This combo works flawlessly. 140 amp at idle, 180 amp at higher RPM. We didn't run the battery charger on this thing one time. We had multiple people come over to us and ask us if we had a 48 volt battery in the car because of how fast it cranked. And the answer is no, it's a 16 volt battery. So, all right, let's see. I also saw a bunch of people having to go through a whole lot of work in order to switch the car over from street mode to race mode. And this looks like, kind of maybe a little dumb sitting on the front of the turbo here, but it works fantastic. This is a little, I think this is from a Honda, or maybe I don't know. Maybe it was like a little, I think it was actually from a hybrid car, like gas and electric. There's a little panel filter. Matt at Performance Fab made this for me. He took a piece of 6-inch tubing, or 6-inch aluminum, pie cut it, and then fabbed up this little bracket to hold the air filter. So when we had to go on a street drive, we just start sliding that thing in there, and then when we're ready to race it, we pull it out, we're done. So our process in between street mode and race mode is cut down a lot when you don't have to worry about pulling a whole bunch of crap out of the way. You just slide the panel filter out, and there you go. The other thing that we did when we did our transition from street to race and race to street was we put a new set of plugs in every morning, right? So we put a new set of spark plugs in every morning. They were already gapped, and that was the other thing. Like, we had like 4 or 5 people ask us for a spark plug gap tool. I was like, what were you doing at home? Gap these things at home, mark that they're gapped, put them in your trailer. That way it saves you the 15 minutes of gapping plugs. So we pre-gapped the plugs before we went, and we put a new set of NGK 10s in the motor, made our pass, and then we drove on the NGK 10s. Now, I will say on pump gas and a number 10 heat range plug, it could absolutely afford to be changed to a 7 and run a little bit better, but it ran pretty damn well, and we got right around 11.8, 11.9 miles per gallon pulling the trailer, whether it be in town or on the highway. When we did our long 300-mile drive and we were all highway, we got right at 13.5 miles to the gallon. So we could have gotten better fuel economy with a 7 plug in it. Could have changed the tune-up around a little bit, but it is what it is. It was easier, in my opinion, to just throw away a set of spark plugs once a day than it was to pull them out, put the road plugs in it, And then when you get to the racetrack, put the race plugs in it. Would it have been a little bit cheaper? Yes. Would there have been double the likelihood of a screw up? Yes. So what I mean by a screw up is not putting the spark plug wire on correctly, maybe cross threading the plug in the head, stripping the threads out of the head. So we tried to trim our potential failure rate down as much as humanly possible. All right. So the other thing we did on our switch over for street to race and race to street was the fuel system, right? So like I said earlier, we ran 2 separate fuel systems. And this is the pump gas side. So this is a Holley drop-in fuel cell module with 2 Walbro 255 fuel pumps in it. We only run one at a time, right? So there's only one running. The other one is in the tank as a spare. Got a fuel level sending unit. And then this, as you can see in this welded line, this is completely segregated. So there's no chance of mixing these fuels. There's no way you're going to forget to turn a ball valve or any of that kind of stuff. And you run your electric fuel pump and you wind up bleeding it through to the other tank. You screw up your methanol. None of that, right? You're not having that. This is the methanol side. It's also got a fuel level sending unit on. We know that we should not make a pass unless we've got at least 50% fuel in this tank. So, if you forget to put fuel in this thing, when it pops up on the dash, you go, oh shit, we're below 50, we need to add fuel. What we did was we carried 10 gallons of methanol at the start of the week and 10 gallons of pump gas at the start of the week in the trailer. We only had to buy fuel on the last day, and the only reason we bought fuel on the last day is because we were going to go through the, and I was a little bit concerned with not having enough fuel in it, but we did anyway. So we didn't even really use, I think we used a gallon or so. So this setup was actually pretty efficient. So this is ran by a cable-driven fuel pump. So it comes off the back of my oil pump up front. The cable runs down the length of the car and the fuel pump is underneath of the back here. So what we did every day, jack up the back end of the car because we got to change the tires. And we would take the cable out of the fuel pump and then slide the cable out of the sheath a little bit so that it disengaged from the oil pump up front. So that means the cable was just hanging out. It wasn't spinning the whole ride. Covered it up with a rubber glove, zip tied it up, and then capped off the pump so no dirt got into the hex drive for the pump, and we were on our way. So one jack underneath the back, we did the tires and we did the fuel pump. The other thing we did is if we had to go to street mode, this car sits pretty low. So if you look, the ride height on this car is pretty low, right? So this is on a 235. When we put the street tires on, the street tires were 29.5 inches tall. These are only about, well, because they're stretched on a 12, they're only about 25.5 inches tall. So the tire, if you'd have left the ride height like this, the tire would have rubbed up in here into the quarter, right? Or up into the wheel tub. So what we did is we put airbags on the car, and I'll show you how it works, right? So there's airbags on the car. They're attached to the frame rail. I made a separate video on this a little while ago, so if you wanted to see more in-depth info about the airbags, you find on my channel. But all we do is we throw a little quarter-turn valve, and we inflate the bags. So I'm going to throw that quarter-turn valve, and you're going to see the ride height change on the car. So here we go. There we go. So now we are up to ride height for the trailer. So it picks the car up about 2.25 to 2.5 inches, gives us plenty of clearance up in the wheel tub for the taller tire that we were driving on the road with. It also makes it a heck of a lot easier to get the wheels off of the car and swap them around. It also makes it a lot easier to get underneath of the car in the back to jack it up. So if the car can sit higher, it's easy to slide a jack underneath of it. So when we were going to street mode, the first thing we did was put the airbags, inflate the airbags, and raise the car. So now I'm going to hit the quarter turn valve, and I'm going to lower the car so you can kind of see what that looks like, right? So all we got to do, hit the quarter turn valve, and now we are back to our race ride height. So no changing shocks in the rear, no changing installed height on the shock to get the ride height. None of that. It also took all the load off of the shock for going down the road when we were pulling the trailer with all the weight on the trailer tongue. The trailer ended up weighing right at 1,830 pounds, complete, ready to go down the road with all of our luggage and stuff. So we probably had one of the heavier trailers on the week. So if you want to look at the system we have for the airbags, it was, we use this onboard air compressor. Got it from Greg Hurlbut at Hyperactive. And all I did was I put a secondary regulator because I wanted the regulated pressure to be set at about 60. This valve right here allows air through and down into the airbags. This valve here lets we let the pressure out of it right there, right? So this onboard air also charges the parachute back here, right? So the parachute is discharged there, and then it is armed there via that air compressor. So that air compressor does not run the boost control, it doesn't run the shifter, it doesn't run any of the other pneumatic stuff in the car, but it does run the stuff in the back of the car. So if we don't have lines running to the front, to the back, we have less places where we can rub through a line and cause ourselves a failure. So we had two, again, separated systems, right? We got one system in the back for the onboard air with the parachute, and then we've got another system towards the front for the boost control, the shifter, the parachute release handle, and I think that was it. So those are a few things that that I felt as if kind of separated us from the majority of the field of people that had problems. Another thing that I got to really harp on, I saw a lot of people that showed up with a car that got run in 2 days prior, right? So I know that this is I know that you want to make the event and whatnot, but if you got an event coming up in say 3 months from now, spend a couple extra hours every night and get your stuff done. Get this thing running. Drive it to work. Drive it, to the store. Go around town. Hook the trailer up and make sure that you're not going to have problems. On day one, I had quite a few people messaging me asking me if I had this part, that part, whatever. It's because they never actually fired the cars up and drove them around town. They may have raced them before, or vice versa. Maybe they never even made a pass. You'll learn that there's stuff that just isn't right when you go to race in the car, and there's also stuff that just isn't right when it comes to driving the car down the road. So spend a little bit of time now. These types of races, all types of races are won inside this shop. Not in this shop, but in your shop, right? So all of these races are won in a shop. They're not won at the racetrack. Granted, the race happens at the racetrack, but especially for drag and drive stuff, because it's endurance, they're won right here in the shop. So spend the time in the shop because you're probably going to be a lot more comfortable. You have all your tools, you've got a ton of parts, and you got a ton of time. So the drag and drive stuff, what I've gathered from it is the goal is to make one pass and get the heck out of there. Get the car switched over as fast as possible and get to the hotel as early as possible so you have a decent spot. If you're anything like me, you spend all night worrying that somebody's going to steal your stuff. And if you get there early, you usually get the best parking spot that you can. So spend more time in the shop so that you have to spend less time working on your car at the racetrack or on the side of the road. I don't know about you, but I don't like working on stuff on the side of the road. A couple other things I want to go over. A bunch of people asked me about the seats. The seats were really, really comfortable, but they are made for people in New Zealand, I guess, or Europeans. They must have like a very weird shaped back because it might be like part Centaur or something. I don't get it. But these little, these lumbar pad things were a lifesaver. For sure, this was the big deal. So they're like $25 on Amazon. Buy a bunch of them, right? Shove them in your seats and figure out which one you like the best, then send them back to Amazon. Jeff Bezos got plenty of money. He can afford to take that return. You know what I'm saying? So buy a bunch of them and try it. Stay right there. So the other thing, while we're in the car, so get yourself a cup holder or 4, right? So there's 4 cup holders in this thing. These look awesome, right? You're looking at these and you go, man, these are the shit, right? We got cup holders. They're all, Frenched in there. You learn real quick that it's right above the transmission. It gets hot. It will boil your drink. So those cup holders that are in there are more so used for just holding random stuff, right? If you've got the space, which this car is pretty tight, being a Fox body and being that Jordan and myself are both over 6'3", we're both over 250 pounds, so we're in here, right? And it's a convertible, so it doesn't have as much space, side to side and in the roof. It's a little bit narrower than a coupe when it comes to interior volume. So what we did is Matt at Performance Fab made me more cup holders here, and then of course Doug Cook at Motion builds an awesome shifter, and then he just released the cup holders that bolt onto this. So we'll probably pick those up too and have 2 more coming off the front. So get some cup holders because you're going to run out of time and you're going to forget to eat and drink. You're going to. It's just going to happen. I ain't never missed a meal, if you can't tell, and I forgot to eat throughout the day. So cup holders were a big one. Drink a lot of water. Also, put a fire system in the car. I use a different company than most people. It doesn't really matter what company I use. Get a good quality fire system. Make sure that you can reach the fire's deployment, right? So this is how you deploy the fire system in this car. There's another one on the back bumper, so it can be deployed from outside if you're knocked out. And if you get used to pulling it, right? So if it's a mechanical system, practice pulling that fire system. There was two bad wrecks, and thankfully both of those guys made it out. One is in a little worse shape than the other, but there was 2 bad wrecks. You're going really damn fast. The worst thing that can happen is that you wreck and then you catch fire, right? So not only you got a broken bone or 2, but now you're on fire. Put a fire system in the car. Don't listen to your buddies saying, oh, if you put a fire system in the car, now it's a race car. Go complete a drag and drive event and tell your buddy to shut up. You know what I mean? Because now you got a street car. Put a good fire system in the car. Make sure it's easily accessible. Another thing that I also highly recommend, not that it's really for just drag and drive cars, but a master cutoff, right? So this switch right here, when you turn that off, it kills the batteries, or it kills the battery in the contactors. So that's from in the car. There's also another one on the back bumper. Putting one in the car will make life a heck of a lot easier to turn power off. If there's a problem on the top end of the racetrack, the driver can reach that thing and kill it before hitting the fire system, right? So you can kill that, and then you go, okay, we're good. There's no fire. We have everything shut off. And then if a fire does happen, you hit the fire system. So that was a big one. Safety is very important to myself, and it should be important to you too. But some people, it seems as if it wasn't, right? Another thing, I already made a video about this, but got a backup camera. That was a lifesaver. Thank you very much, Laura. It played music. I put speakers in the car. They were worthwhile doing, for sure. I also, something that kind of gets overlooked. So with electronics in the car, you have a lot of cables that have to be plugged into, say, the ECU or whatever it may be, right? So these little bulkheads made it a heck of a lot easier, and then you just have to carry one cable, right? So like all the cables are plugged into here, and then they're plugged into the corresponding device. But if I wanted to plug into the Dominator, you plug in here. If you want to plug into the SmartWire, it's here. If I want to plug into the Profiler, it's here. If I want to plug into the VPS, it's here. So I had access to all 4 things via one USB cable. Made it a heck of a lot easier. You could use a cable blaster, but we chose not to because this is a carbon dash and I wanted everything behind the dash, and carbon blocks it out. So no Wi-Fi's. Other than that, I think we kind of covered it. Oh, one last thing. So there's people on the internet that think that these TBM brakes are not good for a street car. Okay, so this car with me and Jordan in it is 3,550 pounds. The trailer is 1,850-ish pounds, right? So these brakes have been on this car for about a year. I've never changed pads. I've never done anything with them. I literally bolted them on. I made the obligatory jack it up and spin the wheel video, but I've never done anything with them. They've been perfect. They've been jam up. Haven't changed a brake pad, no leaks, no problems at all. Pulling the trailer, you have to obviously get on the brakes a little bit earlier because I don't have trailer brakes on the trailer. That is something that I'm going to be looking into doing, but these brakes work awesome. We went 206 mile an hour in the quarter on that little miniature tire, right? That little 235 tire. And that little 235 tire is a little sketchy when you go to hit the brakes because there's barely any contact patch. So you basically got 4 bicycle tires on the car trying to slow down. So the brakes slow this car down very well. They stop the car very well when it's pulling the trailer. We had no issues at all. So I just wanted to kind of go over that. I like the TBM brakes a lot, and I've told people about them, and then I hear some people say, well, you know, they're sprint car brakes. Well, I mean, I don't care what you're going to call them. They work really, really, really well. So if you're in the market for new brakes, definitely check them out. Last but not least, the whole reason we made it through a drag and drive event and didn't blow up on day 0 is because of these guys right here. So I'm not telling you to call them and buy an engine because honestly, they're busy as it is and they probably don't even care. But Par Racing Engines in Spartanburg, South Carolina. They built this engine. They didn't screw up a single thing, which is different than what I am used to for years. Last year we went to Sick Week. We never made it out of the parking lot. This year we made it to Sick Week and we did pretty well. So dig into your engine builders, and make sure you buy a good quality unit, and make sure that your engine builder actually does what they say they're going to do. So just because they give you a piece of paper saying that they did it, make sure you have a little bit of faith in them. So I think that's all we got. So hopefully we see you in April at our event. One last thing. Mentor Motorsports did the shocks or the struts in the front and the shocks in the back. I've been running their stuff for years. Always have, always will. We did not touch them at all for the entire event. Now, John and Mark, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I know you guys told me to loosen them up when we went driving, but I didn't do that. So, no leaks, no problems at all, nothing. I mean, they've been jam up, rock solid. So, transmission ran at about 170-ish degrees the entire time, and the torque converter seems as if it was damn near locking up going down the highway. And that's all because of Byron and Cameron at Cameron's Torque Converter Services. So if y'all are interested in any of this stuff that we use or that we sell or whatever, feel free to reach out to us. And then we also would love to see you at our event. It is April 2nd through the 7th. Shelby, North Carolina at Shadyside Dragway. It's going to be awesome. 500-ish miles total. 5 days, killer racetracks, all 8th mile. It's going to be a fast event. I'm hoping to see some guys show up and have a great time. I will do my absolute best to make sure that you have a blast. This car also will not be in our event. So a couple people have asked if we were going to run this car in the 235 class. No, because I don't think it's right for somebody who's putting on a race to try to win their own race. It doesn't make any sense. Kind of cheesy. I shouldn't say cheesy. It's just not something I'm into doing. So yeah, that's all we got. If you're into drag and drive, you should probably subscribe to Sick the Mag. It's actually a really nice book. It's like a lot of pages and they're all really high quality. And I think if you subscribe now, you'll also get the issue that has our event in it, which was awesome. So there's like a 50-page spread in there about our event from last year in November. Anyway, be safe, have fun, and go drive your stuff. See you.